Hey guys, well, I just finished grading all of your research proposals, and I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some issues and reoccurring themes that I saw within um, the papers, so that I think we could all be on the same page about it. Um, I'll go through the paper section by section, but first off, just in formatting, APA format is required. That is noted in the instructions. Um, so be sure that to check your APA formatting. I gave you guys some feedback on APA for some of you. For the most part, that wasn't a huge issue, but little things. Make sure you have running head page numbers. Make sure that you have headers. Your citation, in-text citations and reference pages are in the correct formats. Be sure to refer back to that APA manual. If there's some additional resources in the class under course resources. There's a lot of like a sample APA paper there. There are APA resources and additional information there as well. So be sure to take advantage of that and make those corrections for the final paper. Okay. Now, as we move through the research proposal process, the first section would be the abstract. Now, with the abstract, be sure you're just giving just general overview. It doesn't need to be a long abstract. Be sure you're integrating those keywords underneath the bottom of your abstract paragraph. That is a foundation of APA format, so be sure you're providing that as well. But be sure that when you provide information in your abstract, it is evidence-based. Now, for research proposals, you've got to think of this information in terms of very evidence-based, quantifiable research. Okay, so in these types of papers, in APA format in general, you don't use a lot of flowery language. Your presentation is not conversational. It is not rosy and very that lends a lot to discussion. It's very factual. So when you're writing, keep in mind that you need to be factual. Just evidence-based. This is the research. Bam, 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 bam. You're explaining what the research says about your particular project. Okay, so keep that in mind. So when you're writing that type of language, and the first person within the proposal is not really something that needs to be there. This is very informational and very evidence-based. Okay, so that kind of language, there's not really a place in there for this kind of assignment. Let's see, in your abstract and also in your introduction section, keep in mind that I saw a lot of people with factual information in there, which rightfully so, it should be there, because your introduction is really your first, and really the abstract. The introduction can be more in depth. It's really a first glimpse at your research and why it's important. So you give them kind of the condensed version, Cliff Notes version of why this is important. So, but within that, there's a lot of factual information, and that needs to be cited. You need to have in-text citations and references for those facts. Anything that's not common knowledge that everybody knows, you need to provide those citations for. Because, like I said, this is a very quantifiable assignment. Everything has to be documented as far as, to provide evidence behind your statements. Okay, so be sure to provide that. In the research questions section, I think some of you provided a lot of information in there about dependent and independent variables, that's good information. But keep in mind that your research question has to be measurable. And what I mean by measurable is that someone could look at just your research question and fully understand what you're doing for your research project. And it is formatted as a question, with a question mark at the end. So just as an example, let's say my research project is going to look at how listening to rock music affects my sleep. Okay, so my research question, some of the research questions I would see out there, or be, how does rock music affect sleep duration? Okay, well, that's a research question, but it's very broad. It doesn't really tell me about what you're doing, right? So if I look at that, I can't really tell, or somebody couldn't tell what my research was going to be about, right? But if I change it to something more measurable, saying, does listening to 30 minutes of rock music at night increase, or before bed, increase the duration of sleep daily. Okay, by that statement, anybody can understand that I'm going to listen to rock music 30 minutes a day, and I'm going to track my sleep duration. So it's really measurable, clear, quantifiable as to how it's going to be done. So keep that in mind when you're reformatting some of those research questions. I try to give you guys a lot of feedback on that. So be sure to make those changes. So we can't have a lack of measurable outcomes. They have to be measurable. So really, by seeing that research question, they could be able to kind of know what they're going to see down in your methods section. I mean, it's not going to be as detailed, but they've got a pretty good picture of what's going to be there. Okay. All right, one of the most important sections, and I've said this before, is your literature review. Now, your literature review serves as kind of the foundation for helping the reader understand why did you choose this research? What made you think this would work? In the scientific world, in in social sciences, anytime you look at journal articles, the reason that they get in journals is because they have used the literature to support their concept. And by doing that, it has been deemed as, oh, well, that's understandable. We see how this person came to this logical conclusion based on the existing evidence. So this becomes a very important part in providing a reliable and valid research project, because without this basis and helping the reader understand why it's important, it becomes, your research gets a little lost. So I know I've had some questions before the paper was due about the number of sources that I wanted. And I typically do not give a specific number of sources, and that's intentional, because I found in other classes that a lot of students will just get to that number of sources and then stop. And that's not the intention behind this. That what I want you guys to look at is, what information do I need to explain this? You may be able to explain in 15 sources. It may be 25 sources. It could be, it's really topic dependent, based on your specific topic. So keep that in mind. There is no right or wrong number of sources. However, I will say that I don't see any instance where you can have just a handful of sources and you have a quality literature review, because of the nature of this type of research. I just don't see it happening. And literature reviews, there's no page limit on the literature review or page requirement. So just keep in mind that it needs to, the length really depends on you, but it needs to be quality, because this is an advanced research course, so it's expected that you will have an advanced level of literature review, and provide a good overview of the topic. And I think we've talked about this a little bit in past videos, but when I think of a literature review for this type of research, you're looking at your independent and your dependent variables, and you go in depth with understanding those particular variables and how they function. So like in my example I gave about the rock music, I'm going to talk about rock music, what it is, how it evolved, if there's any research out there on impacts to individuals, give a really quality overview of rock music. Then I'm going to look at sleep, and I'm going to explain sleep from the point of view of what is sleep, why do we need sleep, what benefits are there, what drawbacks are there to lack of sleep, what interventions are out there to increase duration of sleep. So the reader has a clear understanding of, I understand sleep, I understand how everything works here, and how it all surrounds, and where this kind of research falls in the spectrum of things there that could impact sleep. And then you bring it down, like I've said before, the upside down triangle, you bring it down to where the two meet in the literature. And sometimes if you have kind of a different concept, it may not be there, but something close is. Like in my example, there's probably not research out there that talks about the impact of rock music on sleep duration. Maybe, I don't know, sometimes there's some crazy research out there, but I could find some research that talks about rock music's impact on like exercise duration, or bodily function or something like that, and make the infer from that that this could possibly be have an impact on sleep. Because if it works for that, it may work for this kind of thing. So this is, your sales pitch. This is helping your reader understand. Assume your reader knows nothing about your topic, not a thing, and you're helping them have a good understanding of it. So what I'm looking for and when I'm grading is help seeing that you provide that overview of everything, and I can flow through it and understand and get to the point where, I say, okay, I understand why you came to this logical conclusion. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're going through your literature review, because it is truly one of the biggest things that affect your reliability and validity for your research. So just keep that in mind. Also, this wasn't a huge issue, but just throwing it out there is be sure you're using credible sources. I do prefer peer-reviewed journal articles. However, sometimes I know that's not always possible. So stick to journals or credible websites, meaning like government websites, professional associations, entities that are known for providing reliable data, like the U.S. Census or the CDC, those kind of things. Now, random websites and things like Wikipedia and WebMD and those sites out there that are not necessarily known for quality research or data or information in general, don't use those. Those are not credible resources or credible sources for your paper, and I will be looking out for those. So just keep that in mind. Also, double check and make sure that your references match your citations. If you have citations in there, you need to have a reference, and vice versa. So be sure to do a double check on there when you turn in your paper. Okay. And in the end, the grading is not about your total number of references. It's just about the quality of your literature review. Okay. Now, I know one thing that kind of helps me because I'm a visual person, so I like to see things out on paper, is, understanding the flow of your literature review is sometimes difficult. And, I saw some folks that you look like you were struggling a little bit with your flow. So one thing that I do is I will take post-it notes, little post-it notes, or I will take note cards and put the concepts on the paper. So like back to my example about the rock music, I may talk, on each sticky note, put a concept about rock music, say history of rock music, and then have another one that says, impact of rock music or popularity of rock music, and all these different points I'm trying to make based on, literature I found and things like that. So I have all these common points, and then I'll take the sticky or the post-it notes and organize them. Just like, my first concept I'm going to go over here, and then my next one, and then visually I can see how the literature review is going to flow. And I'll have sticky notes stuck all over the table or whatever, or on a wall at home, just trying to help me organize my literature. So you may want to think about something like that. It may be helpful to you in trying to organize your thoughts and the flow and concepts of ideas, because I think it's hard for us sometimes when we're in like our Word document, we have to scroll up and look at it and scroll back down and look at it, or even just providing a little outline on a piece of paper of the flow of your concept. And then, if that doesn't work, you can move things around and help you provide a better flow. So just a tip you might find helpful when you're working on your literature reviews. Okay. All right. As far as the methods section, be sure that you're providing demographic data for your subject. I know a lot of you guys are doing a single subject design on yourself. Okay, that's fine, but this study has to be written in third person. Okay, you're not talking about me, this is me, myself. You're talking in third person. You provide demographic data, but not in great detail. I mean, you need like age, sex, those kind of things. But you don't need personally identifiable information. You don't need names. You don't need, in your method section at least, I know your name's going to be on your paper, but you don't need names in your method section. You don't need why you think this is important or why it's a good idea for you. Because in the method section, you're just specifically talking about the research, and you're giving a little information on the subject. And in most research papers, subjects are a lot of times kept confidential. Names and personally identifiable information is not used. So keep that in mind when you are writing a section. Also, I know a lot of you are using interventions for that may be proven in your evidence in your literature review. Like for me, in my example, the 30 minutes of rock music, well, why did I pick 30 minutes? Explain that. Why is that evidence-based? It goes back to reliability and validity. Was there another research study that used 30 minutes? And that's, why you think that might be the appropriate threshold, okay, to provide some benefit, okay? So be sure to provide that in there and the citations for that information. If that's relevant to your study. And in the method section, you're really given a design, the design of your study. You're helping the reader kind of understand a little bit more about that research question. Now that's measurable, helps you drill it down a little bit more and understand. You need to provide what type of research design you're doing. Is it A-B? Is it ABA design? How long is your baseline? How long is your intervention period? So they can get a clear understanding of what you're doing. And be specific. Okay, if you think you're being too specific, you can never be too specific. Okay, and that kind of marries into the data collection section, because I think some students get things confused a little bit because they are kind of closely related. Your data collection is going to drill down even further beyond just your design that's in your method section. Your data collection drills down further to help the reader understand specifically how you're collecting your data. Okay, if you're collecting your data, are you keeping for, like in my example, the sleep and the rock music? If I'm collecting sleep data, am I using a log? Am I using a Apple Watch or a Fitbit? And electronics like this, you need to explain how it captures it, how often it does it, all those things. Also keep in mind those factors that affect it, as far as I know my Apple Watch needs charged every day or a day and a half, maybe 2 days. So how are you making sure that, the dead battery or the potential of a dead battery doesn't affect the research? Okay, like me, I might, instead of charging at night, I'll charge my watch during the day while I'm awake at work, and so it won't affect my data collection at night, that kind of thing. So you have to be very specific and thorough about how you're doing your data collection. If you're doing something a little bit different, like measuring stress, anxiety, those kind of things. If you're using an existing measure, like an existing anxiety index, like we use with our clients a lot of times, if you're using that, you still need to include that as an appendix to your research project, there at the end. That way, anybody reading this could clearly understand the measure that you used. If it's something you developed, you still need to do the same, provided as an appendix to the study. Certainly, if you use an existing measure like an anxiety index or something like that, depression inventory, those kind of things, it would provide more reliability and validity to the research, because it's an existing proven measure that's used pretty regularly in research. So that's something that would positively affect your reliability and validity. So be sure to provide a copy of that instrument as well. And I know some of you did that, some of you didn't. Just be sure and provide any kind of logs, any kind of way that you collected the data. Okay. Now, those are the sections that are addressed particularly now in the research proposal. There'll be 2 additional sections for the final paper, the discussion and the results section. And I know some of you included information about limitations or barriers in your data collection section, but that's not really appropriate there. That's something you would talk about in your discussion section, okay? And in your results section, you're going to provide your data and a little bit overview of it, maybe the chart and things of that nature, for that results section. But the discussion that you guys are working on now will help help you get a start on that results section. So just keep those things in mind when you're revising your research proposal components for the final paper. Remember, this was kind of like a first draft of these sections. Then you get to revise and resubmit at the end of the class for the final research proposal paper, and integrate those other two sections, after you've done your data collection. So I just thought it was important to kind of go over these a little bit more, but keep in mind that I gave you guys a lot of detailed feedback in your papers, and they are actually in the content of the paper in little blue bubbles. If you have trouble seeing anything, let me know. I can download and send you the annotated copy that has all the comments on it. And as you review those, look at them, and if you have questions or not sure what I mean by some of the comments that I made, please let me know, and we can have a conversation about your paper in particular, and maybe ways that you can improve or change things. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be happy to talk with you guys about some of those things. I've already talked to some students about changes that they're making to their papers. So don't hesitate. That's what this is for. This is a learning tool. This is a learning process. If you're struggling with data collection, or have concerns about it now based on my feedback, just reach out and we'll make it work. Okay. All right. We'll make changes and make it work. Just keep plugging away, and I hope data collection is going well, and everyone should be doing data collection at this point, because we're down to just a few weeks left before the papers are due. So really, if you haven't started data collection, contact me immediately, because we need to get you started. So you guys have a wonderful day, and take care.